Hey there, everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Chris Yee.
And today we're going to be taking a look at Duel of Meloch, Scythe versus Expeditions. This is coming from designer Jamie Stegmaier and publisher Stonemaier Games. And this is an interesting product, Chris. It's a standalone game.
Yes.
But it is also somewhat of a companion piece to two other games from the same publisher and designer.
Mm-hmm. Scythe versus Expeditions.
Yes.
It comes with a character of each game that you can play head-to-head here in a duel. You can also take those individual factions and put them in the bigger games, and you can take any faction from the bigger games and put them in this game. So it's like a grand circle in the middle of a Venn diagram mess that is Stonemaier Games products.
It's a strange beast. So I'm not going to be giving a traditional overview because it's almost impossible. What I'm just going to be doing is talking about kind of what this does differently. I will tell you, you're going to really, to best understand it, the overview, just as it would be for the game, it helps if you have some background on the two component games, Scythe and Expeditions, but I'm not going to be teaching those games. So
It'd be impossible. It'd be 3 game overviews.
Right.
So
not doing that. And honestly, you can watch the overviews of Scythe and Expeditions because we've done them. If you really, really wanted to, if you're coming from nowhere on this and have no knowledge, there's plenty of information on the channel that you can glean. So anyway, let's just go into that overview and then we'll come back and let you know what I think or what we think. Okay, here you see most of the components for Duel of Meloch, and this is a standalone game, and it can be used as an expansion for both Scythe and or Expeditions. The only thing I'm not showing component-wise is there's a couple of things for the solo play that I'm leaving out. But essentially, everything you need to be able to play Scythe versus Expeditions is here in front of you. And so you have a new faction for the Expeditions player. You've got new faction Constantinople here for the Scythe player and the components that you would need. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not going into a rules overview here. That's just not feasible, since essentially I would be teaching 2 full games, and there's just that's not going to happen. If you are interested in knowing the rules on how to play Scythe or Expeditions, then you can certainly check out our videos for that. For people that are actually getting this game, and if they don't know the rules for one or both of the factions, they're going to essentially have to do that. They're going to have to learn how to play the side that they're playing on. So the Expeditions player needs to know how to play Expeditions. The Scythe player needs to know how to play the Scythe game, but you really don't need to know how to play the other unless you are playing that faction, because you both interact on this same map. Now, there are certain elements here, and this is a double-sided map. I'll show you the other side towards the end of this. This is a map that is going to apply to both the Expeditions and the Scythe player, but you're only paying attention to certain elements on each of these hexes, depending on which side you play. So the Scythe player is going to play on the side where the popularity and power tracks are facing them. So because this is not really handled the same way with the Expeditions player, this is one way so you know the Scythe player would sit on that side of the map, Expeditions player would sit on this side of the map. On the hexes themselves, along the bottom, those are things that concern the Expeditions player. So if you've played Expeditions, those will look familiar to you. If you're Expeditions, you're going to ignore the things on the side. Those are just for the Scythe players. Okay? And the rules for each game are going to be the same. So, in other words, the Expeditions player doesn't have to worry about some of the movement rules that the Scythe player does. Actually, the Expeditions player has a natural advantage when it comes to movement on this map, and therefore exploration, whereas the Scythe player is going to have an inherent advantage in combat because of the way combat works in Scythe. And that applies here as well. The factory doesn't really mean anything specifically to the Expeditions player unless perhaps they're trying to block the Scythe player from getting it. Okay, so each player is playing their version of the game on a shared map. There are a couple of changes between those, and those are going to be explained in a couple of different places. Number one, you've got the main kind of rule book for Scythe versus Expeditions here, and it does not teach you the game because, again, you'd have to look through the actual rule books. What it does do is explain some of the things that are different specifically in this game, and I'll just talk briefly about some of those things. One of the things that is different is going to be how combat cards work. When you are getting combat cards in this game, you'll notice that there's some differences here. And this is why they say that when playing Duel of Meloch, you have to use this deck of combat cards that comes with it. You cannot use the combat cards in Scythe. On here, you'll notice that there's an icon in the upper right of these cards. Those don't appear in the Scythe version of the combat cards. These now, on your turn, you can either use it as a combat card in combat, like you normally would, or you can discard them on your turn for whatever the symbol means on the right-hand side. And so that is something that is inherently new and explicit to this game. And so I thought I would point that out to you, is that you have to use these combat cards, and they do work slightly differently than in the base game. Another substantial difference in Duel of Meloch is how the end game is triggered, and how points are not scored essentially in this game, whereas in Scythe, especially, you've got a kind of an end game scoring. So this is a race to 4 stars here, and that's based upon this board, the kind of the objectives board. And so there's a side A and a side B. You can play on either side. You just would want to make sure that the icons that apply to the Scythe player is facing them, and the icons that apply to the Expeditions player is facing them. So when you are able to achieve one of these benefits, if you are the Expeditions player, you still have to take a boast action in most cases to be able to place one of your stars there. If you're the Scythe player, you can go ahead and do that on your turn there's no such thing as a boast action for the Scythe player. And it's, again, a race to 4 stars. And you can only have one player on each one of these different columns. So in this case, for the Expeditions player, they would have to have vanquished 7 of these corruption tokens, taken a boast action, and gone there. And now this is preventing the Scythe player from being able to do its objective of building 3 or more structures to be able to place one of their stars on it. Okay? And so this is a major difference. The only action that does not require the Expeditions player to do a boast is if they are able to win a combat, which, again, it's more difficult for the Expeditions player to win a combat here just by the nature of the rules of Scythe. One other very interesting element that is new and specific to this game as it relates to this track are these Meloch cards. And this is something that is specific to this game. The way it's going to work is that, I'm just going to move this off to the side for a moment. You would start with one card from this deck face up in a random orientation. And then, for the rest of the game, whenever a player would place a star, the other player will draw the top deck of this top card of this deck, and they will turn it in either orientation facing them so that they will get all the benefits shown. So if they did this, the Scythe player would get a coin and a combat card. They could also instead do this, and they would get a power on this track and a combat card. And so this is a new element of this game too, where it's basically giving a little bit of a boon to the player who did not score a star on that turn. So that's also something that is unique to this game. But really, essentially, otherwise, you are playing Scythe and you are playing Expeditions at the same time. There is a rule summary that you have here that kind of helps you out with some of the things. But again, this is nowhere close to the full rules, okay? So this is for the Scythe player, and there's also one here for the Expeditions player as well that kind of just gives you a little bit of a reminder of some key things, but again, it's not going to substitute for teaching you the game. And there's also an appendix that gives you a little bit more information about the Scythe faction and the Expeditions, Mech character, and some specifics about combat cards and factory cards. Okay? So that's essentially what is happening here. You are playing two distinct games now on one shared map. Now, there's also variants in here, and if you already own Scythe and or Expeditions, you can play a version of this game where it is Scythe versus Scythe or Expeditions versus Expeditions. You can do that on this shared map, and it works essentially the same way. I will show you that there's another side of this map that has a slightly different orientation. Here you can see the lakes are kind of in that middle area there. And on this side of the map, you've got a slightly different orientation where the lakes are adjacent to each other, and you've got the rivers in different locations as well, of course. All right, well, that's going to be the overview for this, such as it is. It's not a traditional overview, but let's head back, and Chris and I will let you know what we think about this. Okay, so where to begin on this? I don't think this can be a traditional review, almost. At least that's the way I'm approaching it.
It's not a traditional product. So,
right.
I'll just go ahead and forthright say, if you don't know Scythe nor if you don't know either game,
yes,
this is kind of a pass, right? This is not like an entry point, like, oh, let me get like a taste of both. That's not what this is. This is definitely, I think, for fans of both games, because you have to have a working knowledge of at least one of them that you're bringing to the table, and a friend who has at least working knowledge of the other one to play with.
Right. Or the components of the game so that you can both play against each other. We're going to talk about kind of all of that stuff. So just as a physical product, it keeps up the tradition of the Stonemaier Games products where, you know, the quality is very good. I have no real complaints about the quality of the materials. There is a bit of a questionable misprint. Is it a misprint? Isn't it a misprint on one side of the neoprene mat?
Yeah.
Just using intuition, it looks like there's a misprint.
That one of the workers the Expeditions player collects should be green. There's two green options. One of them should be blue, presumably.
And it's been brought up and it's been answered, well, it's not really an issue because, the Expeditions player starts with a worker that can be for anybody. But that's production-wise the only thing I've noticed that as far as, anything that could be construed as an error or an errata or whatever.
Or an oversight.
Oversight, yeah.
Because otherwise everything in here feels as good up to quality as the two component games, the two original games. And like I said, you can take the new characters and slot them into the original games and vice versa, and there's no part of that part which feels wrong. So production, I think, is good with that one notable error.
Yeah. And so now let's maybe approach it from a couple of different angles. As a standalone experience, what's kind of presented in this box, okay, which is basically one player's playing a Scythe faction, playing against the other player who is playing the Expeditions faction on a much smaller map with some small adjustments, but essentially the Scythe player is playing Scythe, the Expeditions player is playing Expedition. What are your thoughts about that as an experience, just on a high level? We're not getting to our rating yet, of course.
Yeah, it shockingly works.
Yeah,
I think it's balanced. Games can be very tight with it. As with, I think, either game, sometimes you'll have a person who's kind of clearly pulling ahead.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of these games. You find an efficiency pathway that's just better than your opponent, and you'll pull ahead. But I've seen most games of this be pretty tight, I think.
Yes, agreed. I also think it's quite good. I think that what it really does is make, for the first time in my opinion, a compelling two-player Scythe experience. Because the base game of Scythe I never particularly liked at two players. I just felt like it did not showcase what the game could do. Whereas here, I very much feel like it does. That smaller map definitely increases those things that I tend to like about Scythe and brings them to the forefront here in a two-player experience.
Yeah, Expeditions I thought worked well for 2 players. In fact, the lower player counts are notably better at that game. Rather than, I'll never play 4 and 5 player Expeditions ever again.
Right.
It's too long in between turns, so on and so forth. Part of that is that the Expedition's turn is longer than a Scythe turn.
It is.
So I think that there's a little odd imbalance there. The Scythe player is playing this very quick turn efficiency puzzle. The Expeditions player is playing doing 2 actions at a time, playing a card, chaining something, grabbing this effect. It might uncover something which gets something else cool. Yeah. It's not egregiously longer, but it is longer.
Yeah.
I think that the Expeditions player is going to feel a little bit more at home with this 2-player thing because I prefer playing at a lower player count anyway.
Yeah, but an interesting note is that while I also really enjoy playing Expeditions at 2 and especially 3 players, the map doesn't scale.
Yes.
So it's the same map if you're playing with 2 players in Expeditions, which basically you're using tiles as your map there, as it is for 5 players.
Yeah.
And this, again, I feel the scale of it works very well because there's an inherent advantage to both factions in this particular game, and it's mentioned in the rule book. If you're the Expeditions player, you're going to have the advantage in movement. Mm-hmm. You're going to have more free movement around the map. Whereas the Scythe player is going to have an inherent advantage in combat. And so being able to kind of manage those things, I think, is an interesting aspect specifically of this experience.
I agree. And it plays into both of those advantages and disadvantages as well with what I think is the crux of what makes the game work.
Yeah.
Is that there's that board, the objective board where you place the stars out.
Right.
Unlike either game, this is just purely a race to put out those stars first. Almost more like Euphoria, right?
Yeah.
Because in both games, there's an endgame trigger, or the Scythe and Expeditions, there's an endgame trigger and then scoring points.
Right.
This one is just a race to place those things out. I think that those objectives work really well for both sides, where the Expeditions player has to get 4 of the map tokens, the Scythe player has to get 2. That's about an appropriate balance.
Right.
You're going to have to really efficiently pursue one of those 2 sides, in part so that you get a point and that you deny your opponent the opportunity to do it.
Right, because crucially, those objectives can only be scored by one of the 2 players. That seems obvious, but just to state that again.
Yeah.
So, as its own product, I think it's very interesting. Now, Chris and I have played this several times because we want to kind of cover our bases. So we've played it as the product inside with the included factions, Scythe versus Expeditions. We played both sides of the map. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we also have played, you can play this as a Scythe versus Scythe game. If you have a copy of Scythe, you can bring in any of the factions from Scythe and play against, you can play against themselves on here, or you can play against the one that's in here. Mm-hmm. You can do the same thing with Expeditions, and we've done both. We've played Scythe versus Scythe, and we've played Expeditions versus Expeditions.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think that of those 2 options, I think this works a little bit better as Scythe Duel than as Expeditions Duel, and we might disagree on that. I think that playing the Expeditions 2-player mode of this has a few little extra kind of wrinkles in the rule set, which is fine, which is good. But it's like almost a little bit smoother to do the Scythe. So there's fewer remember that in this particular case, there's like these little differences and stuff.
Yeah.
But I do like both of those experiences.
Yeah, I do as well. I'm with you, or I kind of am what you're saying. That's a terrible way to put it, but it is true that for me, I like the Expeditions versus Expeditions experience almost as much as the Scythe versus Scythe experience. I do feel like it feels more condensed, both in time and what you can do. One of the fun things in Expeditions is that you can kind of build out this big, long thing. You don't usually have the time to go too crazy in this one because it's a race, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it comes to an end quicker, which for many people, and probably for myself, is a bonus. I do want to talk about what I think is probably the biggest negative to this as a product.
Let me say one quick thought, please, in response to that. I think that you make a really good point. Think of this, if you're playing Expeditions versus Expeditions, it's kind of like playing an Expeditions duel game where it's like kind of a smaller experience. You're not going to necessarily get a bunch of meteorites melded and items tucked and do all these and have a huge card engine and a bunch of workers like you can in the original Expeditions as much. It's a more condensed experience because of that quick-paced nature. But also the same thing goes for Scythe, which I think kind of works to its favor as like Scythe Duel because it is a smaller, quicker thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
My biggest negative to this is in many ways similar to what I think is one of its greatest positives, which is that this really is 3 games kind of in one. It's Scythe. And so you have to know Scythe, right? Scythe was my number 1 game of all time for many years, but it's been a hot minute since I had played Scythe. And when I sat down to play the Scythe faction, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like I needed to like really refresh myself a lot. They do have kind of like, player age sheets, but it's not going to, if you don't know Scythe, you're not going to be able to, with what's in here, you're not going to be able to know how to play it. You have to learn how to play Scythe.
It's for the minor rules and the edge cases, which seem to crop up very frequently. Okay, these 2 things happen. Which of these things is going to affect first, or what is is there a different rule between regular Scythe and this version of it?
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for Expedition. There's a lot of edge cases that the rules as printed and come in this box don't cover.
They're not going to cover it.
We had to go to the respective games and pull out the big rule books and flip through and say, okay, hold on. This little edge case here is resolved this way.
Yeah, and so know going in that if you're not familiar, especially if you're not really familiar with either of the games, and this has struck your interest for whatever reason, you've got some heavy lifting. You're going to have to read the full rule books, which are not in here. You can get them online freely. I mean, it's not hard to find the rule books for Scythe or Expeditions. I'm sure the Stonemaier site would have them
link
there.
Right to a Dropbox.
Right. So it's not that's not a problem. But
I say that out of experience because I've used it a lot over the last few weeks.
Right. There is a lot of like referring, and I've played both of these games a lot. And I'm still looking through stuff. And so that's a negative, I think, in that what it's doing is very ambitious, and I think they're largely successful at it. But that's also a potential negative in that you as a player, you've got some heavy lifting to do unless you play both of these games frequently and recently.
Yeah, I agree, because even playing, just when we played Expedition versus Expeditions, and it was fun. That's the version, or that's the game I'm way more familiar with than Scythe, right? And playing through it, we came across this moment where you go, oh, okay, hold on. Flip through the rule book, flip through the page, that's the Expeditions reference page, pull out the main rule book, flip through it, got it.
Yeah.
That is a huge downside of this that you have to be aware of going into. And we're not trying to oversell it for drama effect.
No.
That's the playing experience. Will that go away if we play this a bunch more times? Especially with the little nuances that are different. Hey, remember in Duel of Meloch, there's this extra symbol. Or when this happens, the battle cards are different.
Yes.
Or in Expeditions, there aren't battle cards. In this version, there are battle cards. And in Scythe, don't use the original Scythe battle cards, use these ones.
Yeah.
So then you say, okay, well, these 2 things came up. Here's this interesting interaction.
Yeah.
How is this going to resolve?
Right.
It just comes up a good amount.
It does. So, that is, I think, a significant thing that you need to consider when you're trying to find out if this game is for you or not. Now, lots of positives, too, and I think we've mentioned several of them. I think this is very successful at what it's doing. I really enjoy playing both of these games, whether it's Scythe versus Scythe or, Scythe versus Expeditions or Expeditions versus Expeditions. I like all of those experiences on these 2 maps. I love what they did with the combat cards, changing them so that now you can discard them for a particular benefit. The race aspect, I think, works very, very well. I really have enjoyed it. If anything, it's almost reawakened my appreciation for both of these games separately.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm kind of, I'll go to my final, and then you can, if that's all right.
Sure.
So overall, I'm going to be giving this an 8.5. I do think it's excellent at what it does, but man, there are caveats. There are some big caveats there, and I hope that we've made that clear. It's an 8.5 for me because I've played both of these games a bunch. I'm not going higher because I've played both of these games a bunch, and I still, in some ways, felt like I didn't know them because I had to keep referring back to stuff. And so, ultimately, I think it's excellent at what it does, but you really have to know what you're getting into.
Let me ask you a question on that, right? There are people who Scythe is their lifestyle game.
Yeah.
And maybe also really love Expeditions. Mm-hmm. If you were to be able to kind of wipe that from your experience and say, I knew the rules perfectly.
Yeah.
How would you, obviously you would still love the game a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that would be an easier experience for you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. I have the same experience. I can't say, my introduction to it was flawlessly smooth.
Yeah.
And yet I still really liked it. I'm giving this one an 8. Mm-hmm. I still think that it's very solid. I come to it because the playing the two factions in here versus each other, it's good. I like that the Scythe player has more presence on the map, but they're slower. And so it kind of turns this weird, it has the same thing where in basic Scythe it feels like, this is going to be like a big old fighty brawly game. Not really.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel like that. It has those little moments of Expeditions that feel great as well as you uncover things and I unlock a boast action. I can place a star out there. I think that little balancing mechanism, the Meloch cards, as they reveal.
That's great. Yeah.
When someone gets a star, the other side gets a bonus card, and they can kind of lay it out. If they're further behind, they get more benefits that stack up. Mm-hmm. I think that's really brilliant and does kind of help alleviate a little of that runaway leader of sorts.
Yeah.
The first of, I think, any of the games in this universe to kind of do that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I think that the Expeditions player is... I like the scoring in Expeditions a lot, and that's gone from all versions of this. It's now just that race. For me, the fact that that's gone from Scythe is actually a benefit, and it makes me like the play loop of Scythe a little bit more. I think that a lot of people who love Scythe will disagree with that.
Yeah.
I've never loved Scythe. I think it's a game I respect a lot, and this one makes it more fun for me. So all around, it's kind of this like, it's a little lower here, it's a little higher here.
Yeah.
I think all the different versions of the experience are very good. Let me ask one more question here.
Okay.
So 8.5, 8, we think it's really, really solid. If you only owned one of the two games and wanted to buy this as kind of a dual version of just that game, do you think that would be worth it?
It would... Just as a dual version?
I think for Scythe, hands down, yes.
Yeah. For Scythe, it's not even a question because...
it scales lower.
Yeah,
worse.
Right. I would certainly consider it for Expeditions, too, honestly, just because I kind of like that snappier two-player Expeditions thing here. Although I do like Expeditions at two-player. But I can't get past the fact that it really doesn't scale that way, but I don't know. I'd be more on the fence if you only owned Expeditions. But the other thing I do want to point out really quickly is that if you were going to get this mostly as a way to get another Scythe faction and another Expeditions faction, they're pretty cool.
They are pretty cool.
I do like the new factions, but that would, from an economic, I don't know if the value proposition would work there, but they are cool factions.
We're trying to answer all these questions that people will have.
Hard, right?
Like you said, an atypical review because this is an atypical product, but one that we both like. And a high score of an 8.5 is a seal of excellence for Duel of Meloch.
All right. Well, hopefully we've covered the bases, folks. I didn't talk about the solo because I'll tell you what, that probably would need its own review, and maybe it'll come. We'll see. No promises, but maybe I'll do something specifically about the solo. But that's good to know, too, is that it has a full Automa mode that will play any of these versions. Okay,
yeah, that's true.
So that's for another video potentially. All right. Until next time, I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Chris Yee.
And you got some reading to do.
everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.